All right, let's wrap up the discussions that you're having and conclude. All right. So I heard a lot of really good conversations about, the various sort of spectrums of metrics collections that people are on. Some people are already on the track of collecting metrics. Some people are just starting. Was there any particular insights from any of the groups that you guys want to share? Some people over here went to college together. Nobody wants to share? Come on, somebody. Danny, did you have any good discussions?
Well, I was getting permission first.
Oh, okay.
It's okay. Permission granted. Yes. So it's a good situation that I label this as courage. It takes a lot of courage.
Thanks. So I would love to track metrics. I think it can be extremely valuable, but I work in a department where the couple of times that I have brought it up, I bring it up to our art director, and he is completely and 100% opposed to it. And so I think that idea throughout the entire team, all of our creative members, they would be just completely opposed. So I have a little bit of a struggle there and trying to wrap my head around how do I pitch this and how do I make it seem like a good idea. I think their initial thought is that, why do you need to track my hours? Am I not working hard enough for you? Do you not trust me? Do you not trust me with my time? And so there's a personal aspect to it too. I don't want to lose that trust.
Is anybody in the same situation?
Yeah?
She's the only one that has, challenges with creatives. Did somebody have their hands raised over here?
I share your pain. Just working I work for Beats by Dre, and the creative department there, anytime hours get mentioned, they're diametrically opposed to, it's about thinking and creativity. It's not about tracking metrics, So trying to quantify it in that way is very difficult, and I think we've been talking here about coming up with ways to quantify, for management so that they can see the productivity of the department, but it's really hard when the people who need to be tracking that time are just vehemently opposed to any sort of oversight in that way.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think we were talking about it at another table. It's like anytime a creative sees a number next to their work, they immediately, respond negatively. But I think another discussion that we had was you don't want to wait till like the oh shit moment when you actually then have to justify resources or justify. You want to be able to get yourself ahead of that so that then when you have to make those decisions, you have that data to back you up with that. Ooh, we have a suggestion, and then I'm coming back to you.
So if you kind of reverse psychology and tell them it's about visibility and how they're working too hard, and you want to bring them an additional resource and try to make sure that the workload is split evenly. So it's kind of encouraging them to share how hard they're working, and so that you can prove that to upper management. Because they could say they're working so hard, but until you can actually show that, like they're working 10-hour days, they're working on 20 projects at a time, that kind of, if you go at it kind of backing them up, that might be a way to approach it. That's how I'm approaching it right now.
Cool. Oh, hold on, we had going in order everybody raised hands. To be fair.
I just had a little bit of a different thought in it, and with my teams, I feel like I've really realized that even the most creative person wants to know the value they're contributing to the business. We were having a lot of discussion at our table, less about the per piece or piece count output of how many this person can do at a time, and more about kind of the strategic contribution, whether they're moving the needle or not. We have a goal on our homepage for the designer to talk about driving the click. Right? And so that's a metric that you can talk to them about, a value of what was the percentage click-through of that particular module because of the art they created. And I think starting those conversations is completely different than kind kind of ruling them by piece count or measuring it by the minute, and more about kind of trying to help them tie back to the value of the contribution that they're making throughout the day. And everybody wants to know the value of their contribution, and I think that's a great way to start a number-driven conversation, because it's more about what they're doing to have an impact and less about justifying your existence, your team's existence, or their existence. And I think it's a really big value add that when they can understand it and they get to the end of the year, they know what their contribution was. It makes them so much easier for them to tell their story and to be on board with kind of helping to tell the story of the organization.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really great point. You had a question?
So that actually is the beginning to the answer, potentially, of my question. But I guess I was curious from the folks here if you have other baseline metrics outside of hours. Like if you were to look at setting a baseline that is not hourly or number of pieces put out per minute, what would that be? And I like the idea of the value given, but again, that's not necessarily a concrete thing. So I'd be curious if there are any kind of strategies that are implemented that could maybe help as a jumping off point that might make the conversation easier down the road of, okay, now we're going to implement, an hourly or number of content thing based because we're already tracking these metrics.
Click-through or conversion or kind of traditional marketing metrics.
Yeah, does anybody have anything? Exactly. I think it's demonstrating the value of. Ooh, Nish has some ideas.
Hi, my name's Nish. Just as background, I'm the CEO of a tech company, and we sell to creative ops teams, so I've got to spend time with a few dozen creative ops teams. So here's my point of view, and I'll just sort of rant for a couple of minutes if I could. A lot of people are talking about, please, how do I get people to go along with, like, inputting numbers and things like that. So my point of view on, and I'll get to your question in a second. My point of view on that is, get over yourselves. Part of it is you're the creative ops leaders. It's your job to, as Julianne was saying before, frame the right story to get people to go along on this journey of metrics. Two is, don't be afraid of calling people out on it. Like, if somebody is afraid of metrics, do they really fit into the culture that you want to build into your organization? And I think you maybe need to have some pretty brutally honest discussions with people, as opposed to saying, please, can we hold hands and it'll be fine and blah, 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 right? Like you need to call people out on this stuff. Two is along the same lines is you can scare them. And here's the world that we live in today is if people are scared of measuring productivity and their output and things like that, which is just the basics, and I'm going to get to the other things that you should be measuring, then my response to them would be this. We live in a world where Accenture has a massive creative production team. They do all the creative production work for eBay, Google, and a number of other companies. There are salespeople from that organization and a whole bunch of other agencies and everywhere else knocking on your finance team's door, knocking on your CMO's door, knocking on your CEO's door, saying, outsource it to us. We could do it more cost effectively. So if you can't stand there and compete with the people from the outside who are trying to take that work and that business away because you haven't been measuring anything because you can't get people to go along with it, well then you've just written your own obituary. It's just a question of time. And I'm sorry if that sounds a little bit harsh, but it's the reality of it. So that's part of the story that you need to tell if you can't get people to go along with it. One of the canaries in the coal mine that some of you may have noticed earlier this year or last year is that when McDonald's changed their agency of record, that new agency of record set up a separate creative production agency. How is that deal structured? They charge McDonald's cost. There's no profit. The only way they make profit is if they move the needle on McDonald's marketing KPIs. And coming back to this and what this gentleman here was saying earlier, yes, start measuring output. So your volume metrics, how much stuff did we do and things like that. That's the basics, though, and you should be doing that today. If you're not, you are well behind the game. Second is efficiency metrics. How efficiently are we doing these things? Because that will then drive, how healthy are our processes? Do we need to go back to the table and think about changing them? So don't try and come up with the perfect process on the whiteboard. Just put something in place, start moving, start measuring things, and then let the data tell you what conversations do we need to have and what decisions do we need to drive around our process. But finally, if you want to still exist, if you still want to be relevant, and if you want to make sure somebody from the outside isn't taking away that work, if you want to go where creative operations really needs to go, which is not project management, it is actually measuring what is the impact you have on the business, as the gentleman from QVC was talking about. Because if you're not doing that, you're just body shopping stuff. And somebody's always going to say, I could do it faster, I could do it cheaper. So what is the impact you're having on the business? And that's why I think creative teams need to start looking at marketing data. So look at, here's the creative content and output we produced. Here's how many clicks it got. Here's how much stuff was put in the basket. Here's how much revenue was tied to it. It's not easy, but as Juliana's done at Farfetch, it's possible. The data's out there. Like, getting the data, inputting the data, come on, guys, that's not the big problem. That stuff is easy. It's actually being able to tie it back to what is the purpose of the business. What results are you trying to drive? That's where creative operations needs to go. And I've been to 8 creative operations conferences over the last 3 years. My company started the first one. We're still talking about the same things that we're talking about 3 years ago. It's time to move forward. Very few people in this room are thinking about what creative operations really needs to be. It's still being treated as project management with a cooler title. So when you think about metrics, volume metrics, efficiency metrics, what is the impact on the business metrics? Those are the key things. And if you're not driving towards the impact on the business, then you're going to be competing for your jobs with a whole bunch of people from the outside who are going to go, we could do it faster and we can do it cheaper. And there's always somebody that can do it faster and cheaper. So that's my point of view. I'm very non-Canadian.
Some tough love there. All right. Thank you. I think that was like a lot of wisdom to impart to end the talk on metrics. So I think with that, I think we have a break right now, so everybody can head down and get some coffee.